Okay, here I am today with Mark Lakeman. I saw him speak at the Communities Conference for the Fellowship of Intentional Communities, and he shared about Share It Square, where we are sitting, and we can take a look at it and hear the story and go from there and talk about all its implications and how we all can participate in city culture, community building.
City repairing, yeah.
City repair, yeah.
Okay, well, we were just talking about families and people having children, not in the context of community, and what a daunting challenge that is for people who are living alone, especially without family members around to support them. And some people actually choose not to have children purely because it's such a huge endeavor that people don't really want to undertake by themselves. Some families don't want to do that by themselves. And I think that is a way that you can look at a lot of different aspects of human life, of living in cities especially. So I think that's the kind of challenge or issue that has motivated us to do the work that we've been doing in communities. We're trying to create a sense of place that people have a sense of ownership in, and where they interact and they create together. And one of the outcomes that we're hoping comes of all of this is that people are able to reweave networks of mutual support again.
Yeah.
Fortunately for us, we were highly motivated because we realized that American communities are created by developers, and unlike villages where people actually create their landscape together as a reflection of their daily activities and their values and the things that they need to do to meet their needs, American communities, on the other hand, are not laid out by the people who live there. They're laid out, they're literally, the lines are drawn, and the things that we live in are built more as products. And so if that's the case, then Americans should not be surprised that we don't have village squares, we don't have public squares in the communities where we live. And this is, for a lot of people, this isn't an issue because they've just grown up where it's normal to feel alienated from other people. Unless you travel to the lands of your own ancestors and then come back here, it may never become an issue where you would say, oh my gosh, where are all the places to interact, to even sit, like where we are right now?
Yeah.
To gather and dance and share food and co-create in your community. These days in the United States, that kind of idea is relegated sort of mostly to the left. That's a sort of leftist progressive idea. Well, actually, I think this is the best way to distill it, distill the issue. A conservative man in one of our community workshops in Portland recently said it this way. And he said, before I came to this meeting, I thought that this was just for people on the left, for liberals and progressives. And now I realize that community gathering places are a common cause. He said, by God, what good is freedom of assembly without a place to assemble? And I think you can put it that way to any conservative in the land, and they can relate to that. Because no conservative person, no liberal, no progressive person wants to live in a world that someone else has designed that is dysfunctional. Everybody in America, no matter who we are, has pretty much embraced the notion that we need to have a say.
Well, yeah, also, if you think about conservative and leftist and all of that, it's about how divided we are, and it's because we can't relate to each other's humanity because we don't interact with each other in intimate ways. And I think that's what's going to break down barriers of understanding, and is to be able to interact with people. But I think there's so much great stuff of you talking. I would like to direct the audience in my introduction to all these, overarching ideas that you've had where you talk about the grid and all that. There's a lot of stuff out there. But I think what I'd like to get out of this is this story of, you painted the intersection. I can do a little swivel of the camera here. We have, what is this here? On this street?
Across the way is a kids' clubhouse. And it's made out of branches and recycled plexiglass. Basically, almost everything came out of a dumpster.
Can we
And,
actually go over there and look at it and talk about the process of making it, who actually built it, how the materials came together?
Yeah.
How did you get permission to build on this block?
Well,
on this-
initially, as you know, this whole project began illegally, where the people in this community had realized altogether that American communities were developed without places. And so we said, well, it seems that in the villages of people's ancestors, the main gathering places happened where people's pathways came together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of like urban design 101.
Okay.
Where people's pathways come together, they're supposed to be meeting each other. So this is the most basic principle of how you design villages, towns, and cities. And we just kind of looked at that pattern and how it works in places around the world that everyone has come from in order to come here. And then we looked at our own community and we said, by gosh, we live in this huge development grid, but that doesn't have places. So we looked around at this intersection. We thought, well, why couldn't this be a public space? After all, it is public space. Why couldn't it take on a more diverse set of uses besides just being a place for people to drive cars and to just walk? Why couldn't it be a place where people could stop and interact? So we decided on this corner to create a place for kids to play, and we wrapped this little building around this living tree here, and it's always got toys in it. Usually there's books and magazines as well, but this is a place where you can find kids playing almost all day long. Moms will bring their kids down here to hang out for an hour or two, sometimes lots of kids, and it's right on the edge of a typical neighborhood street, as you can see, but because there's not really very many cars coming by, it's really easy to supervise kids. So that's on this corner, and on that corner you can see we have this solar-powered 24-hour tea station.
Mm-hmm.
We have a place to sit covered with a roof, a living roof, and that's everything you're seeing here is not just an expression of ecological design, but it's also an expression of community building, but also a community building itself in a way, without much in the way of resources.
Yeah.
So it happens that we don't have money, so we have to be scrappy.
Yeah.
We don't have money, so we have to use what we have. And because we don't all have enough, we have to share. And what's really lovely about that is, you know, all the theorists that are talking about bioregional economics and sustainable economics are basically saying, oh my gosh, we need to share. Well, the people who are going to lead that cause are the people who are already kind of used to sharing, who need to share, who've learned how to be humble. And that would tend to be the working class, the middle class, that sort of spectrum of people. And it won't come from people who are moneyed. Not only they're not tending to want to or be interested in each other, but moreover, they're not even interested so much in sharing, but in having. So organically, things have just been falling into place here. There's a little library on the corner over there. There's another place to sit, and on that corner there's a place for newspapers and community
And
news.
I want to get it on in there. And you were just talking about sharing, so I did want to call attention to the fact that it's called Sherritt Square because the street is actually called Sherritt Avenue. So that's quite poetic. Okay, so this is a nice bench. And then what's over here, you said?
It's a little library.
Oh, okay. And people just
Let me take
MacBook
those
for
towels
dummies.
out. What this is about.
And people just drop off and pick up.
Yeah, although they tend to drop off a lot of magazines and just kind of collect.
And over here is the community board, you said?
Yeah, it's a place for news and information.
And then And what's this cob structure here?
This is a place where you can get the Selwood bee.
Oh, right. That's
So you
right.
just
I
kind of
remember
come
now.
up to the little station here, and you can reach in and get the bee. So the reason that this is shaped like a beehive is because this is the bee.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an idea of a group of kids.
Great. And then here we have the intersection that was painted. Was there an intersection repair as well, that you call it intersection repair, right?
Yeah, it's called intersection repair.
And this is about the 17th time it's been painted. You started this project around 17 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And I remember you talk about the tea station as part of the, seminal part of, do you want to go back over to the bench?
Sure.
Where you started to develop these ideas. And then, so living on this block, were the people living on this block part of those conversations initially?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you gather those people together to begin talking about those kinds of things? Did you just go knock on their door? Or?
Well, the way everything got started here was that we were having a kind of a dessert potluck every Monday night, and it was happening over on this block over here. We had built this really wonderful little tea house made out of natural branches and recycled materials. It was very beautiful, and yet it was also very humble. And at first there was just 25 people coming, and then within a couple of months there were more than 500 people coming from across the neighborhood and all across the city.
So that was here. That story, because I've heard you talk about so many different things, and I didn't realize how connected it was in that way. So it started, the 25 people, they were people from this block room.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a sense, the culmination of this was because of that gathering, but so there's already groundwork that must have been laid before that to create an environment where 25 neighbors would get together, because that is actually quite unusual.
Well, it really wasn't much groundwork. It was just really that initial tea house. And that tea house brought people together, and then they started to know each other. Okay. And before that time, they didn't know each other much better than people do in any other neighborhood. People would just sort of see each other, say hi. I don't believe that there had ever been a block party, even in the history of the neighborhood. So it was a very special thing, though, that was done. I mean, in most communities, if somebody has an idea to bring people together, they'll have something like a block party, but then, from there on, they'll just kind of go back into their daily routine of coming and going.
Yes.
In our case, though, we all started to talk. Like, we talked about the fact that our neighborhood is a housing zone as opposed to a village, and that by law we all have to go elsewhere in order to make our livelihood, whereas in villages around the world, for a lot of people, their livelihood is created with the people that they live with, that they live among. So as they're building things, or as they're growing things, as they're consuming things, they're also building community all the time.
Yeah, and it compounds on itself. The collective sharing and participation and processes build over time, so that you're sort of investing, as opposed to each person has to fend for themselves, and it doesn't compound.
Well, this is what we realized. We realized that we're not getting multiple benefits out of the work that we do in our daily life. We're mostly just going elsewhere to make money, to pay for a place that we don't really even get to inhabit most of the time, because we're in transit or we're working elsewhere. Here's a villager.
Hello.
Pedro, are you going to be around tomorrow by any chance? For Jenny, she's looking to do some interviews of people around here.
Just of the process of what it was like to develop the Sherritt Square and stuff like that.
Maybe in the afternoon, early evening.
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
Yeah. Might make an article or
Sure.
something like that.
I'll think up some notable
What
quotes.
do you just wheel rocks around?
That's his job.
Yeah, it there's a little stash of rocks before something happens on this corner.
Uh-huh.
So anytime I have like 5 minutes free, I'll just grab some rocks.
Cool. Okay. All right.
Well, his name is Pedro, which means rock. So he's kind of obsessed with them.
That's right.
Where do you take them?
My house is here.
Oh, you gather rocks and bring them to your house. I like it.
I don't always do this. Only when there's
No, he always
an
does this.
opportunity.
There's a guy named Leaf. He's always gathering leaves.
Sweet. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'll give her your number.
Okay, I'm going to the farmer's market. We're selling today, so.
I'll see you there.
Awesome. We're going to have champurrada, which is like a special like atole beverage,
Okay.
a corn beverage.
All right. Hopefully I'll get some of that too.
So you were talking about you don't even get to inhabit the space
Yeah.
that you are going to work to pay for. Well, and for me as a renter, I mean, it's the same thing. You're going to pay money to be able to pay for rent space, but also it's like you're doing wage labor to be able to pay for food, and then you spend your free time maybe having time to take a gardening class if you're lucky, but then everything will fall into disarray if you're too tired after work to upkeep it. So, I mean, the idea of farming at home is really hard to pull off with wages.
Well, okay, what we're talking about here is what planners across the USA in every town and city refer to as the Roman grid.
Mm-hmm.
And most Americans do not realize, I mean, those who have gone to architecture and planning school realize, maybe politicians and developers realize that we live in the Roman grid. The thing about the Roman grid is, and we can be talking about the USA and we can be talking about everywhere else in the world where it's been used. But basically, underneath these long, straight, flat lines where everything is made into big squares and then the land is cut up into separate parcels, rectangles called lots, underneath these lines are stories of native people. I think that's really important to realize. There are all kinds of patterns that have been obscured here, rather like the patterns of, for instance, my ancestors, whose villages were also destroyed for the sake of imposing the Roman grid, when the Romans literally came in and attacked the Celtic villages of my ancestors. Now, I don't think the Romans were any more interested in doing more work than they needed to, than anybody else. They could have just said, well, why don't we just let the surviving Celtic people live in their own villages and have them do what they're told. But you can't have that, because if people live in their own villages, they're going to gather like they always do, and then they're going to decide to have their own ideas, and they won't necessarily do what they're told. So that's an old, long story that's still with us now, because one of the things that we realized was that we're living in this grid that basically is designed to see us as a resource or as a workforce. If this place was designed for culture building, it would be infused with places to sit and interact. It would be infused with gathering places, because after all, that would help us to know each other better. It would help us to make sure that our children were safe every day. But that isn't what's happening. We're living in something that was designed on paper in 1785. They literally, the National Land Ordinance was created, and they said, okay, we're going to take the Roman grid and cast it over the entire continent by mandate of this document, all the way to the Pacific Ocean, no matter what any indigenous society has to say about it. And as people go west, they'll claim land, but they'll be in the grid. They'll be in a framework that keeps them connected to the East Coast. The people on the East Coast, the founders of the country, were interested in expanding to a gigantic scale that would basically organize the whole continent. And everybody who was going west thinking that they were getting a fresh start really didn't realize that they were just moving into a framework.
And so, in whether or not we are aware of, that we're in this repressive, history and how that is manifesting the way our structures are made and all of that, breaking out of that, a lot of what I found interesting about stuff you're talking about is working with just sort of municipal codes and people just like being so used to enforcing rules, not because they're evil, dominating, militant, people, but that they're just so used to seeing things in this certain framework, and that you were able to sort of melt those and get people to recognize what you're doing.
Yeah.
That I would like to get to because it's a great story.
Yeah. Well, the way it began was, I had come back from all this traveling to visit indigenous cultures. Let me just start at the beginning. So I was brought up in this design-oriented family with this kind of heroic modernist perspective that design could change the world, and I think that's still kind of part of my religion in a way.
Yeah. You're into permaculture. That's kind of,
yeah. We can intend, we can collaborate, we can make the world a better place. First of all, by realizing that we make choices, and we can make this choice or we can make that choice. We can also make choices together for mutual benefit instead of always sort of working against each other. Well, I was working in this big corporate design office, and there was this huge toxic waste cover-up that was disclosed one day, and I decided that I would quit that day. And I felt so betrayed. I was so upset, and what had happened in that cover-up helped me realize that that kind of thing is happening all over Western society, because they were just laughing and joking about this cover-up, and government inspectors had been paid off and things. So I went traveling for about 7 years, just working, stopping, working, making money, keeping sort of, then in order to keep going. And what I saw in all these village-based cultures that I visited was a different sort of level of creative vitality that people were getting to experience in their villages. And at the end of that, kind of at the end of the journey, when I finally realized that the best place to go see human nature, if I could find it, would be a place where no one had ever been conquered or colonized. Was there anyone, anywhere that I could find that had not been disrupted by the violence of an empire? And I managed to find a group of Mayan people that had retreated from the Spanish at the onset of the Spanish invasion of Yucatan, and they had gone into hiding. These days you can find them. They're known as the Lacandon Maya, but they weren't contacted until about, I think, 50 or 60 years ago. So I got to go there after they had learned how to speak Spanish as a second language, and let me go there. Anyway, while I was there, I thought I was there to study human nature, and what I learned when I was there was, what I was really there for was to learn how to be a person myself, not to come away with abstract ideas. At one point, a person literally said to me, "Okay, so you're here to sort of study us like we're objects, but really, what you need to do is learn how to be a human being. It's like you keep getting on a bus with the identity of who you're trying to be, and you ride that for a while until you realize that's not getting you anywhere, and then you take another bus." And he said, "Now you're just going to walk. You're going to walk and be yourself." And along the way, as I'm having those kinds of conversations, I also got to learn about the nature of colonialism. And this person at one point was literally holding my face in his hands while I was crying. I was saying, "I'm so sorry for what's been done to you. I'm so sorry for the violence that's been done to your people, and for stealing your land and killing everyone." And this guy's like, "Oh my gosh." He's like, "You still don't have any idea." He's like, "You can't take this upon yourselves," meaning our culture. I'm like, "What are you talking about? Look at what we've done to you." And he's like, "No." He's like, "At least we know who we are, because it was done recently enough that we know our own story." But he's like, you don't even know who you are. Like, you don't know what's been done to your story, to your family. Like, when you get home," he said, "stand in the middle of a street intersection and notice that as far as you can see, north, south, east, and west, there are these long, straight, flat lines." He said, "Do this when you get home. Try to learn when the story of your family and the story of those lines intersected, And he said, then you'll know who you are. And what he was meaning was, this is the Roman grid, and it's always imposed in a violent process that is being resisted by the people who already live there. So, I mean, so I came back, I looked at the long straight flat lines, I started to look again at this history that I had already studied in architecture and planning school, and I realized that I lived in a design that had social consequences. Like, we have the highest incidence of violence between people related to social isolation of all first world countries, and interestingly, we have the lowest number of gathering places of all first world nations. This has to do with development practices, it has to do with the Roman grid. So getting back to your first question, the strategy at that point was just to say, okay, well, people probably need places to gather, so let's try putting one in this community.
And so you were bringing your ideas to this collective, people coming together for tea.
Yeah.
And you started talking about this influencing you, and then together and it resonated with them, and people were right. And then
it was a test. It was just to see, will people respond? Like, if they're hardly saying hello to each other and never working together, but you create an environment that restores one aspect of community one aspect of community culture that we're probably hardwired to need. Let's just see how that works. And so I put in this gorgeous little tea house, and it was open to everyone. Nothing cost anything. It was just run by sharing. The response was phenomenal, and just to say it led to people seizing the street intersection, realizing they needed a village heart, and then it led to organizational structures and more than 300 projects across the city, because we had really hit on a leverage point on an issue that was,
the intersection.
Common. Yeah.
Yeah. But the actual coming together of painting the intersection is, to me, it's not just that you have the intersection. The community was created before you created the gathering place, because you had to create the gathering place together. And so what I'm getting from this is that the tea station brought the people together to have the conversation and then take action. So for someone like me who wants to, or someone, after I saw you speak, I've been talking to my dad about your model of how things can happen in urban, and he's already started making his lawn into a communal gardening place and getting kids all over the neighborhood to come and plant.
Beautiful.
And it's in its forming stages. He's been going and getting all this wood from up in the hills and bringing it and making these funny raised beds out of tree trunks and talking to parents, and they're all ready to go. So he was able to start working on this from me talking about it, because he's retired and he has a blog and already sort of working relationships with people. So he could initiate it, and it's easier in his context, I think. Especially when it involves kids. I live on Oak Street between Webster and Fillmore, and San Francisco between Hayes and Haight, and I don't think there's very many kids around, so that whole family, it's a lot of, there's one child in my apartment complex, but I can't envision creating a tea house, especially when I want to cut to the chase. I want to find out if I can have chickens in my backyard, or that kind of thing.
Well, not everyone has to start the same
yeah,
way.
it can have its own process for everyone. But I'm just looking for that. What I'm looking for is inspiration for others, where you could get over that that fear of interacting. So, like, once you started doing this, you had to talk to people who were maybe more reclusive, maybe less family oriented. How did you pull? You have an anecdote you told. I call the bikini incident at the workshop. Things like that, like how that's not coercive, but it's persuasive. Like, how do you? I want to hear those stories. How you were able to break down barriers with people who weren't coming on board as easily.
Well, again, I have to come back to that tea house and just say that at first, a few people who were more comfortable talking to other people came.
Yeah.
And then, as they were coming and going out of their house, maybe they'd see their neighbor, and the neighbor would say, "What is that
What's going
thing?"
on? Yeah.
And then the neighbor who had already come would maybe feel like they knew it was open-ended and everyone was invited. So then they would invite their other neighbor to come with them. So it was sort of people who kind of tend to show up first were the ones that showed up first.
Yeah.
They were already motivated. And then they helped other people until, I literally knew everyone around here for blocks all around. And this was our strategy: make it beautiful,
Yeah.
make it, fun. Beauty and food is pretty much
Yeah.
like, your first sort of
That's how I do library
set of
programs
strategies.
to get
Yeah.
people to come to those.
Yeah, so that was really it, and then you just know that people will just be out there talking to each other after that. So this was to be a catalyst to help people start doing what they do. But
Yeah.
the truth is, even as we see all these things changing around us now, we still live in a housing zone that makes it so everyone here has to leave to go get livelihood. So we haven't changed everything about this place.
Well, that's where the great lead into the garden, because if I could choose all the things that I'm interested in, gardening would come first. Growing your own food, so you don't, so you can, being able to grow your own food in an urban setting when you don't know how to garden is a stretch. But being able to grow some of your food so maybe you could work part-time is progress. And
Yeah. All right, so we're standing in front of the Ferbel Escarate house, and it's quite remarkable because the couple who lives here are very active members of the community. Um, the female member of the household is a naturopath, and she's converted the front of their house into a clinic. And then, as you can see, they've enclosed the front porch to make a waiting room and a small bathroom for her clients. And then at the end of the driveway, you can see that they've added this wonderful new piece to their house, which is their new family room. But what's extraordinary about it is it's the first permitted straw bale structure in the history of Portland, Oregon. And it also has these wonderful sculptural columns made out of cob or earthen masonry that help to make the front porch really special. The colors of the house are exuberant, partially because this family comes from Central America. Actually from Latin America, and they just identify much more strongly with these themes and these colors.
yeah,
So they brought them with them to Portland, Oregon.
yeah. Cool. So cob is straw and clay kind of mixed together, and it was illegal.
You might say that cob is a form of natural concrete.
Uh-huh.
It's made of clay and sand and straw and water.
And it was illegal before to use it, right? Before they did it?
Well, it depends on how you use it. It's always been legal as a plaster, and it's always been legal as a thermal mass inside of a building, but it's not been legal to use to build houses with, just simply because it's not been legalized within our code. The thing that's important to realize, though, is that most people in the world do live in earthen buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the vast majority of the world population lives in wattle and daub structures, which is basically, simple wood structures covered with earth. So, and that's, sort of adobe type structures would be counted in that as well. You can see that we have a really big garden out front. We practice a lot of composting. So we're always building soil fertility even as we're growing things to eat. And you can see we've got some fruit trees happening, getting started. We're retrofitting the house inside and out with all kinds of things that are basically known as sustainable systems, like gray water. We have a heating system that we also use at the same time as we're generating heat for the house that we also cook off of and use to dry our clothes. So we get like 13 benefits sometimes at once out of our one heating system. So our ecological footprint is incredibly small here at the house.
And then this is a cat palace, right?
Yeah, that's known as the Cat Palace, and in the back there's a Chicken Palace.
Mhm.
But there's lots of different shared amenities and community spaces all around the site.
Mhm. Cool.
Yeah.
That's great. And
Okay. Let's keep
we're
going
going this way.
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned before that these are potholes that they made a strategic decision not to fill because it slows down traffic, right?
Right. Yeah. If we fill these potholes, people will go fast. So it's a traffic calming strategy.
Yeah.
These folks have got raised planters. You can see that they're dormant for the winter, but they have raised planters out front. And they've got fruit trees around the site. They live on a very small lot, and they're growing a lot of strawberries here. You can see some other, so I think there's some rhubarb there. So there's also a fence here, which is a sort of a food forest.
Mhm.
There's different layers of productivity happening there. So um,
What's this structure here with the round cylindrical things?
that's an above ground cistern.
Okay. Is that rain catchment or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it catches water off of the roof.
I like how, as you know, how pretty it is, because oftentimes those things are these big plastic, you know.
Yeah.
This looks much nicer.
Thanks.
And let's see.
Um, let's see. Why don't we go over here as well?
Okay.
So right across the street from the houses we were just looking at is our friend Nina, and you can see that Nina has been doing a lot of things in her front yard. She's got some young fruit trees going, and now she's got chickens here in the front yard
Mhm.
in a little mobile chicken house.
I wish I knew how to use it.
Chickens are able to range around the site. She's growing lots of berries in her backyard. Um, but this is kind of something that she has fun with. She's got herb gardens and vegetable gardens and berry gardens and chickens.
Mhm. Nice.
Next to her is this house. This is Brian and Cheryl, and you can see that they have a strong orientation toward native plantings,
Mhm.
plantings that'll support birds and other wildlife. And then on the south side of their house, they have raised planters for growing vegetables as well. And over here across the street is our other friends. This is Fred and Leia's house, and they have lots of fruit trees. They have beautiful gardens all around their site. Um, and their house is a really beautiful presence on the street with its color.
Yeah.
But yeah, fruit trees and raised planters are basically what they like to do. Hi.
Okay. So it's this block, but it's like kind of like the 4 blocks that all are adjacent to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. This one's got a lot of kind of crap in front of it, so it's not so nice to look at.
Okay.
But let's see. I don't know if you can get a good shot of it, but so this is a community house. There's several adults living here, also with children, and they work out of their own garage, making things. They have a welding shop, and tomorrow morning I'm going to be meeting them to talk about putting in a new shop up on our local business street where they're going to be doing. They're going to be making food. They're also going to be having a welding shop as well as a carpentry shop. And they're going to open this little business up to teach people how to do these things with their own hands.
Mhm.
So people will be able to come in and learn how to take an old piece of metal, for instance, and make it into something like a knife. But presently they're working out of that garage right there.
Mhm. So they have, okay, got it. Okay. And what is this? Look at these.
This little piece is a part of an old tea house that used to go around on the back of a truck called the Tea Horse.
Uh-huh.
And we're getting ready to turn it into a kids clubhouse.
Cool.
So coming up here, you can see the intersection where we were sitting not long ago.
Yeah.
But as we're going, you can see here's a community raspberry patch here. And over here is our cut flower garden. It's pretty dormant, but you can see the flowers are starting to come back.
Yeah.
And then here's another kid's playhouse located right on our street intersection, and that's made out of branches and old recycled material, largely because we don't really have money in this neighborhood to spend, so we're working with whatever we can find to build things. Hi there.
Hello.
Okay, here's another community house. In their front yard, they have a big garden just on the other side of these structures. This is the solar-powered tea station, and then the house that you're looking at was actually painted by the community. There was an old lady who used to live there, and she didn't have enough money to paint her house since the mid-60s. So when people found out that she didn't have resources and help, even enough money to buy paint, we all bought the paint together, and then we pressure washed and scraped and painted the house for
I
her.
remember that story from the workshop, and you guys found out about it because a little boy had gone over there,
That's right.
right? And found out. So she didn't even know you guys were going to do it. He was like unintentional informant, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, she said, "How come you don't paint your house?" And she said, "I can't afford it." And then
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
He kind of raised the alarm,
yeah,
you might say.
okay.
Let's see. Let's maybe walk over this way a little bit. So there's a really strong sense of value for community here, and some of the houses really look nice. Some of them look really old and tired, but that's not really what's happening here. Um, what's happening is that people know each other. They know each other's names. They do things together.
Hmm.
They have dinner together. They create together. They build things. Sometimes they employ each other for different things.
You know what comes to mind for me is that community is something that is really exciting and rewarding and helpful and useful, but sometimes it's overwhelming because of time management and
Yeah,
and now people, oh, I can't make it, or that kind of thing,
yeah.
having too much on your calendar. um, I mean, it's the trade-off, I'm sure, is worth it, but how all do you just learn better communication skills about, I need
Well,
to take a break or take some time to myself, that kind of thing?
when you consider that, I mean, kids are supposedly they're on some kind of technological device 6 hours a day these days.
Yeah.
I don't know if that includes school or not. And adults are spending hours in front of TVs and computers.
And
I
Facebook.
think
Yeah.
a lot of what's happening in terms of time availability is that we've just simply discovered that real life is more interesting and compelling.
Yeah.
And, your own story can be more interesting than a fake story,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but people feel so isolated. The TV is their best friend.
Yeah.
Around here, people actually get excited to come outside and tear up a lawn and put in a vegetable garden. Like here, for instance, you can see all of this straw. This is a this is actually a garden bed that has been mulched with straw over the winter time. But you see the sticks that are coming up. Those are marking where certain plants have gotten started. I think that there's beans and squash that have been
Hmm.
planted here. I'm not really quite sure because I didn't organize this. But this is just an ordinary lawn that's been turned into a place to grow food instead of just a place to mow. Um, and those are the sorts of things that get people up around here, get
Hmm.
them excited. Let's see. Let's just keep going a little bit.
Okay.
These are fruit trees right here that we're passing by, and these were pruned by a neighbor who lives across the street. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, except it is kind of a miracle. When one American will cross the street to prune another American's trees, something good is happening. Here's another good thing. This is where our friends Miriam and Lester live, and this is their frog-shaped pizza oven made out of cob.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's basically a community pizza oven um, up against the fence there. But this is just a demonstration of how people are being outward and public about their values. Like, you might be walking along here, and I don't know, probably most people don't realize that that's cob, but they'll see it and they'll see an expression of a person's value. Like, obviously they like to bake things, obviously they like art, and if you know a little bit more of the story, you realize, wow, they really like community, and evidently they like pizza.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, this is basically a story. Across the way here, here's another one. So this is our friend Carmen's house, and you can see that she's created her own little playground here for kids. She really
Oh.
loves kids, and not just her own kids, but she likes to make a place for other kids in the neighborhood to be able to play. And she also has this interesting sculptural feature in the front yard, um, which is made of cob again, and it's topped with a little living roof. So this is probably the smallest living roof in the city here,
Oh, I can't turn it that
but
way.
it's a little demonstration project um, about how to do an ecological thing, but just doing it on a very small scale. And then you can see there's a trampoline. And Carmen, like a lot of other people around here, actually has a plan that's been created by the students of our school over on the other block, um, that's been created as a roadmap for her. And it's not that the students just handed her a plan. They sat down with her, they talked with her about her lifestyle and her values and her goals. They kind of analyzed the house and how it works and how it could work better. And then they provided her with several different layers of ideas about how to capture her water that's just coming down on her roof and turn it into a resource, how to heat the house more efficiently, how to bring in more light, um, you know, so those sorts of things, and how to grow more food here as well. So most of the people around here now have plans for what to do, and then they've done a few things toward the bigger plan.
Yeah. So it's continuing to grow and thrive, and we'll have to come back and do another take when
Yeah,
more stuff's happened too.
yeah. Now here is an ordinary house where nothing's been allowed to happen. You can see that it has a fresh lawn. I think this was just installed, this lawn, and he's just wanting to rent it out. The man who owns this doesn't live in the neighborhood, so he doesn't know anything about what's happening here, and he doesn't let people do anything who live in this house, um, because he doesn't live here. He doesn't care. Like, he would need to know more about the people around here in order to care. But as far as he's concerned, it's just a rental property where he makes money. So that's his value.
Yeah.
That's why it's kind of cold and low maintenance oriented. You can just sort of see that it's completely ordinary and doesn't have anything remarkable happening.
Has she tried to approach the landlord and give an overview of what's going on and what?
um yeah, the
Yeah.
the people who live here have just moved. No one lives here now because they're so frustrated with this landlord.
Oh wow.
So the landlord's now losing money because of their own choices.
Right.
Um, so it's just a paradox. The people who used to live here,
Unless they want to turn over people because the market, you guys have maybe improved the market for this block, and so he can make more money by pushing people out,
I don't know.
or like letting their frustrations make them leave.
Yeah. Well, the people who used to live here were wonderful people to have in the neighborhood, and they helped out with a lot of things. And their young boy was a friend to the other young boys around here. There's sort of a little gang of young boys, and he was part of that. So now they're gone, um, which just says a lot about the nature of the paradigm that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I happen to think that people really want to find a place and get started making it work for them.
Yeah.
They want to set their roots down and build relationships with other people. But it's really difficult the way that things are set up now, um,
It's
for
that
people to do that.
it's the place and the going to work, because I feel like I have the capacity socially to inspire people around me and say, hey, let's do this. And I'm good at organizing people,
Yeah.
but I'm too tired. Even I work, I made a conscious choice to move towards part-time work. I mean, now I'm working 30, but still that should allow me enough time to this, but you need more time.
Let's go over here now.
Or you need like a couple friends for moral support, you know,
Yeah.
if you're going to try to do these kinds of things.
Yeah, you definitely have a hard time building community all by yourself.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But even if you just plunked me down in Chicago, you know, right now, I would immediately get started doing things that I can do by myself that start to delight people
Yeah.
and cause them to notice something. So now this is Betty and James' house, and they have a small garden going. They have a permaculture master plan, and they now have a small vegetable garden, and they now have a gateway that's been installed in a fence so that their neighbors can travel through the block.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal. We've also been taking the leaves off of the street. That's going to happen again this weekend. We're going to take all these leaves and then we're going to put them on to their garden beds so that the leaves will be a form of mulch and compost at the same time. So they have some amount of activity going on. One of the things that Betty does is that she keeps the tea water hot and keeps the cups clean at our tea station on the corner. So that's what she likes to do. And then right next to them is our friend Leslie. She's also hampered by the fact that she doesn't get to own the house. She's renting it. She wants to live in this community because she identifies with all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
But she doesn't really get to change her own house because her landlord, once again, does not live here. Okay, so this house is it belongs to a couple with a young child, and this is a really great example of what we're talking about adaptive reuse and sort of challenging a lot of assumptions. This is where the mayor's liaison to planning and sustainability functions in the city lives. She lives here with her partner, who's an architect, and they're both very conscious, versed people. Like, they know that the society is undergoing all these stresses, and they're interested in sustainability. So one of the things that they've done is they've taken up almost all of the grass on their site to put in a vast vegetable garden, which you can see. They also have a small orchard of fruit trees, apples and pears and some figs. And then below their house in their basement, they've actually put in a little preschool. So they're generating surplus income while they create a place for local kids to be able to come, so that their parents can just sort of walk across the street and bring a child over. So yeah, bringing living and livelihood back together
Yeah.
is a really, really important thing that's no less important than growing food in your yard.
Yeah.
They also have a backyard habitat as well. They're a certified backyard habitat by the Audubon Society because they've created an environment that attracts and supports bird populations and then small mammals as well. So there's a lot happening at this site for sure. But this is all pretty much on the same block.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, I don't think you skipped one house so far. Is it okay to walk across it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're just covering a few of the stories.
Yeah.
Over on that person's porch in the greenhouse, there's the Cascadian flag,
Uh-huh.
which is a flag that's flown all along the west coast from Canada down through Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, where people are identifying with Cascadian values. We're part of the Cascadian bioregion. So the person who's flying that flag is basically saying that they're part of a larger community.
Is that the bioregionalism thing?
Yes.
Okay. I just learned about that with Caroline. She told me about that. I was
Yeah.
like blown away. Wow.
So that's what that flag is standing for. So even though there's not a lot of apparent community, you can see that a lot is actually happening here. So now as we're walking down this way, we're going to be walking past another little chicken house. But one thing we haven't really talked about on our little tour around this block is that most of the people on the block actually have chickens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think 5 out of the 9 houses, maybe even 6 now, have chicken gardens, chicken houses. I think you can have 3 chickens without needing to get a permit in Portland, Oregon, and if you just get a simple permit, then you can have something as many as 6 chickens, I think. So we have 4 at our house. One nice thing that's going on at this person's house is that they've given up a lot of their yard for the community. So here you can see that this whole section of their yard is given over to grapevines, and we've got some vegetables, some fava beans going on. We like to plant fava beans in order to not just harvest the beans, but also they're nitrogen fixing plants, which means that they infuse the ground with nitrogen, which is really great for the plants that will follow. Here you can see we have piles of leaves. We're actually making compost here. We collect the leaves all around the block. We try not to let any leaf go to waste on this block. Like you can see we have a lot of trees. So we want to save all of the leaves that come off of those trees, because those leaves are made out of minerals that the fruit trees are taking out of the ground and then producing leaves and fruit with that. So we want to take all of that juicy fertility and fold it back into the soil where we live.
The reason I stopped here was that I wanted to get this sign. You had a little something about this sign?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, this sign was put in by a group of older women on the block who decided that they were going to slow traffic. And even though it isn't legal to say to people that they can only go 15 miles an hour or that they have to only go 15, these ladies decided that that's the way it was going to be. And I really have a hard time thinking that any Department of Transportation is going to want to try to argue with these 6 ladies all over 60 years old. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that official might leave the neighborhood,
Yeah.
this is where they live.
Yeah.
So, which says something about the power of place-based community.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, a lot of the ways that the system works is based on the idea that people will report each other for breaking the rules. But what if everybody in the community
Was in on it, yeah.
is in on it, and
Yeah.
they realize that the rules were never made by them? They're not their rules. So maybe the rules need to be re-examined and recreated so that things can work better for everybody. So that's what happens a lot of times in these community building initiatives in cities, is people start to find common cause with each other and they want to support each other. So now we've just made it all around the block.
There we are. I think that's where we started. Cool. Oh, wow. There we are. Yeah.
Let me get a picture of this here.
This is a greenhouse that you built on the side
Yeah.
of the house. I was admiring that. It's beautiful.
So this greenhouse is made out of all old doors and windows, basically stuff that would ordinarily just go to the dump. In Portland, Oregon, though, stuff like this does not go to the dump. It goes to the rebuilding center, or people keep it and they use it. They sell it, or they trade it, or they give it to someone. But stuff like this doesn't go to the dump anymore. So what we did was we took these and we made them into a greenhouse on the south side of our house. So what we do is we catch heat in here, and we use that, what's called a microclimate, in there to grow plants that would ordinarily not be happy in the northwestern part of the USA. So we've got, bamboo in there. We've got some citrus trees. This is where we start vegetables, and then we also convect the heat that accumulates in here, and we send it into the inside of the house. So this is a way to just take old stuff and turn it into a new thing.
Cool.
So let's go this way.
Where'd all the persimmons come from?
The persimmons come from a series of local trees.
Wow, look at this. It smells good. There's some kind of incense or something.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Here's this. Oh, hello. Oh, what a beautiful chicken coop. I've never seen a coop like that before. Hey, little guys. Oh, is this the chicken palace?
Uh-huh.
It's this little.
This is a little 56 square foot house that we built for our friend Jane to stay in. It's really just a summertime napping space,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a house that you can just take apart in a couple of hours and put onto the back of a truck. All the wall pieces pop apart.
Uh-huh.
Here's a gateway, this heart-shaped gateway that
Uh-huh.
leads to our friend Betty and James' house,
Uh-huh.
which we saw before.
Nice. And so is that one thing you had mentioned was there being able to cut across, what was the reason you wanted to somebody wanted to be able to cut across the lawn?
Yeah, that's
As
the gate that lets us go to Pedro and Adriana's house.
Yeah.
There.
Instead of having to go out all the way over there and around the whole block.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Very good.
Yeah, and here's another pathway. This is our friend Annette and Pat that live here,
Mm-hmm.
and Dan. And so we have taken down the fence here so that we can walk through on the path.
Got it. Yeah. This is normally where a big fence would be between two houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you can see we've got fruit trees growing here and bamboo, and there's also a bunch of strawberries and things and raspberries going on as well. But this is part of replacing a fence and instead putting in food.
Yeah. Very nice.
So the trail just kind of comes out this way and it goes out to the Sherritt Square again.
There's chickens over there.
Yeah, they've got their own chicken garden too.
Yeah, see, I'm all turned around now. It is disorienting because you're used to doing the grid walk.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, left, right, east, north. But this, you're like going around and you're going all over. Yeah, cool. All right.